George Russell thought Canada would save his championship. Instead, it may have started the biggest Mercedes controversy of the entire season. Russell was dominating the race. Pole position. Sprint winner. Leading comfortably. Then suddenly, in the middle of a corner, the entire Mercedes shut down completely. No power. No electronics. Nothing. And now the FIA is reportedly taking a much deeper look into what actually happened. That changes everything. Because this is no longer being treated like a normal Formula One retirement. The suspected issue points directly toward the MGUK system, one of the most sensitive and most powerful electrical components under the new 2026 regulations. And inside the paddock, people are beginning to ask a terrifying question. Did Mercedes push the car beyond safe limits chasing performance? Because what made Canada so shocking was not just the failure itself. It was how unbelievably fast Mercedes looked before everything collapsed. Russell and Antonelli were pulling away from the entire field. The W17 looked almost untouchable. Then suddenly, the race leader loses all electrical systems instantly while under maximum pressure. Now combine that with what happened afterward. Antonelli inherited another victory. 5 consecutive wins. Russell dropped 43 points behind in the championship. And Toto Wolff suddenly sounded far more worried than a team principal who had just won a Grand Prix should sound. Because Mercedes may now have a much bigger problem than one DNF. They may have built the fastest car in Formula One, but one that is operating dangerously close to the edge. And once the FIA starts looking closer at a dominant team, everything becomes more intense. Every upgrade gets questioned. Every lap gets analyzed. Every future failure becomes suspicious. And the deeper you look into Canada, the worse the situation starts to feel for Mercedes. Russell admitted he heard strange noises before the shutdown happened. Engineers are reportedly investigating extreme electrical stress inside the system. And meanwhile, the internal war between Russell and Antonelli is becoming more emotional every single race weekend. This is no longer just a reliability story. This is trust collapsing inside a championship fight. Because if the FIA confirms Mercedes crossed technical limits, or if another electrical failure happens soon, this season could explode into complete chaos faster than anyone expected. And the terrifying part for Mercedes? The rest of Formula One is now watching them more closely than ever before. Canada was supposed to be George Russell's comeback weekend. Everything finally looked perfect for Mercedes. The car was fast in every condition. Russell looked confident again. And for the first time all season, Kimi Antonelli actually looked vulnerable under direct pressure from his teammate. That is what makes the collapse so devastating now. Because Russell did not lose Canada through a mistake. He lost it while driving one of the best weekends of his entire Formula One career. Pole position. Sprint victory. Race lead. Aggressive but controlled defense against Antonelli. And complete confidence inside the car, until the moment everything suddenly died. At first, the race looked like a Mercedes masterclass. Russell launched perfectly from pole. Antonelli immediately locked into second place. Within just a few laps, the two silver cars were already pulling away from everyone else on the grid. Ferrari could not match the pace. McLaren started losing time. Even Verstappen looked unable to attack consistently. Mercedes finally looked dominant again. And that is exactly why the paddock became suspicious so quickly afterward. Because Formula One teams always pay attention when one car suddenly becomes dramatically faster. Especially under brand new regulations. The upgrades Mercedes brought to Canada clearly transformed the W17. Better balance through the chicanes. More aggressive traction. Stronger launches. Faster qualifying pace. Everything about the car looked sharper immediately. Now add another detail. Russell and Antonelli were not simply cruising comfortably at the front. They were fighting each other aggressively. The lead changed multiple times during the opening phase of the race. DRS attacks. Late braking moves. Defensive positioning right at the limit. Every lap looked intense. And underneath all of that pressure, the electrical systems inside the car were working at maximum load. That matters enormously under the 2026 regulations. Because modern Formula One cars are no longer just mechanical machines. They are incredibly complex electrical systems constantly balancing power deployment, energy recovery, cooling, battery management, and performance output simultaneously. The MGUK alone now operates at massively increased electrical levels compared to previous years. In simple terms, these cars are pushing more electrical energy than ever before in Formula One history. And whenever teams chase huge performance gains in a new regulation era, they naturally begin operating closer to dangerous limits. That is exactly why Canada became so alarming internally. Russell later admitted he heard unusual noises before the car completely shut down. That one detail changed the entire conversation. Because now the paddock started asking uncomfortable questions. Did Mercedes already know the system was under extreme stress? Did the non-stop battle between Russell and Antonelli overload the car beyond what engineers expected? And most importantly, did Mercedes unlock their incredible speed by pushing reliability closer to the edge than rival teams were willing to risk? Those questions become even more explosive now that the FIA is reportedly taking a deeper look into the situation. Because once Formula One governing bodies begin examining electrical failures under brand new regulations, tension spreads immediately across the entire paddock. Rival teams start analyzing data more aggressively. Engineers begin comparing energy deployment traces. Political pressure behind closed doors increases fast. And suddenly, every future Mercedes performance becomes controversial automatically. That is why Toto Wolff sounded unusually cautious after the race despite winning again. Mercedes understands the danger perfectly. Once suspicions begin spreading publicly, dominance becomes much harder emotionally. Every qualifying lap gets questioned. Every upgrade becomes suspicious. Every technical issue becomes headline news instantly. And internally, the pressure is becoming even worse because of the growing rivalry between Russell and Antonelli. That rivalry no longer feels healthy. It feels personal. Russell knows he was fast enough to beat Antonelli directly in Canada. Antonelli knows the championship momentum is fully on his side now. And inside Mercedes, the emotional balance between the two drivers is starting to look dangerously unstable. That is the hidden problem Canada may have exposed. Not just a mechanical weakness. Not just FIA scrutiny. Mercedes may now be trapped between unbelievable performance and a car operating dangerously close to the edge every single weekend. The deeper the paddock looked into Canada, the more uncomfortable the entire Mercedes situation became. Because suddenly, the conversation was no longer only about George Russell's retirement. It became about how Mercedes achieved that level of speed in the first place. And in Formula One, that is where pressure becomes dangerous very quickly. Rival teams immediately started paying attention to the electrical behavior of the W17 throughout the weekend. Not just during the race. During qualifying too. The acceleration traces looked aggressive. The deployment out of slow corners looked extremely strong. And the car's balance through the chicanes appeared dramatically improved compared to previous races. That combination created suspicion naturally. Because Formula One teams understand something casual fans often miss. When a car suddenly gains huge performance under new regulations, there is almost always a hidden trade-off underneath the surface. Sometimes it is tire wear. Sometimes overheating. Sometimes reliability. And sometimes, teams push systems closer to technical limits than rivals feel comfortable attempting. That is exactly why the FIA attention after Canada became such a massive story. Now, it is important to stay accurate. The FIA has not publicly declared Mercedes guilty of cheating. That has not happened. But deeper technical scrutiny alone is enough to create enormous pressure inside Formula One. Because once the governing body starts analyzing one team more closely, rivals immediately become more aggressive politically behind closed doors. Questions start spreading. How is Mercedes generating this electrical performance? Why did the car fail so catastrophically under pressure? Was the system operating safely throughout the race? And here is the terrifying part for Mercedes. They may not even fully know the answer themselves yet. Because under the 2026 regulations, these electrical systems are still extremely new territory for everyone. Teams are learning the limits in real time. And Canada may have been the first major warning sign that Mercedes pushed those limits further than expected. Think about what happened logically. Russell and Antonelli were fighting harder than almost anyone expected teammates to fight. The lead changed multiple times. Both drivers kept attacking relentlessly. And every one of those battles demanded maximum electrical deployment from the car repeatedly. That creates enormous stress inside systems already operating near peak capacity. Imagine sprinting at full speed while carrying a backpack full of heavy batteries that are slowly overheating. At first, the performance feels incredible. But eventually, the system reaches a point where something simply cannot handle the pressure anymore. That may be exactly what Canada exposed. And internally, Mercedes suddenly faces a brutal dilemma. Because the upgrades clearly worked. The W17 now looks capable of dominating races consistently. But if that performance comes with fragile reliability margins, the team has a massive problem heading into the rest of the season. Do they reduce performance and protect reliability? Or keep pushing aggressively because Antonelli is building championship momentum every single weekend? That is the trap Mercedes now finds itself inside. And emotionally, the situation is becoming even more unstable. Because George Russell no longer sounds like a driver calmly fighting for a title. After the race, his comments sounded emotionally exhausted. He openly admitted the championship now feels like Antonelli's unless something dramatic changes. That statement matters enormously. Drivers do not usually say things like that publicly unless frustration has reached another level internally. And frustrated drivers become unpredictable. Sometimes they overdrive the car. Sometimes they lose patience strategically. Sometimes they stop trusting the team emotionally. All three possibilities should worry Mercedes right now. Especially because Antonelli is moving emotionally in the complete opposite direction. Confident. Relaxed. Winning constantly. 5 victories in a row now. That creates a dangerous imbalance inside the garage. One side feels momentum. The other side feels pressure. And Formula One teams become extremely fragile when those emotions stop matching internally. That is why Canada suddenly feels so important historically. Not because Mercedes lost one race. Because Canada may have exposed the exact point where everything surrounding Mercedes started colliding at once. Extreme performance. Extreme pressure. Extreme electrical stress. Growing FIA scrutiny. And a teammate rivalry becoming more emotional every single weekend. That combination can destroy championship teams incredibly fast. Especially when the rest of Formula One is now watching every single Mercedes move under a microscope. And now Mercedes faces the phase every dominant Formula One team fears most. The phase where pressure stops staying internal. Because after Canada, the entire paddock is watching Mercedes differently. Not with admiration anymore. With suspicion. Every rival team now sees the same thing. The W17 may be the fastest car on the grid, but something inside the project suddenly looks unstable. And in Formula One, instability spreads fast. Think about what happens next psychologically. The FIA is paying closer attention. Rival engineers are analyzing Mercedes telemetry more aggressively. Media pressure is exploding around the electrical systems. And inside the garage itself, the emotional atmosphere keeps becoming heavier every single day. That combination destroys calm decision-making. And calm decision-making is exactly what championship teams need most. Because now every single race weekend becomes dangerous for Mercedes in completely different ways. If the car dominates again, rival teams will immediately question how Mercedes is finding the performance. If another electrical issue appears, the FIA scrutiny grows even stronger. And if Russell and Antonelli collide emotionally on track while all of this is happening, the entire situation could explode publicly overnight. That is the nightmare scenario Toto Wolff is desperately trying to avoid now. Because Formula One teams can survive one controversy. What destroys teams is when multiple problems begin feeding each other simultaneously. And that may already be happening inside Mercedes. The reliability issue increases emotional pressure. The emotional pressure pushes the drivers harder. The harder driving creates more stress on the electrical systems. Then the FIA attention increases even further. It becomes a cycle. A very dangerous cycle. And Canada may have been the first moment Mercedes realized they are trapped inside it. Especially because George Russell now looks emotionally different after the retirement. Before Canada, Russell still sounded like a driver fully convinced the championship fight could swing back in his favor. After Canada, the tone changed completely. His comments sounded exhausted. Frustrated. Almost resigned emotionally after losing what may have been his strongest weekend of the season through no fault of his own. That emotional shift matters enormously inside Formula One. Because drivers racing under frustration often stop calculating risk normally. They become more aggressive, less patient, more willing to force situations immediately instead of thinking long-term. And now Mercedes must somehow manage that version of Russell while Antonelli keeps becoming stronger every race weekend. That is incredibly difficult. Because Antonelli is no longer behaving like a rookie enjoying success. He now looks like a driver fully convinced the team belongs to him. The confidence over the radio sounds natural. The race management looks calm. Even after inheriting victory in Canada, Antonelli immediately focused on controlling the gap behind him instead of showing panic or emotion. That is championship driver behavior. And inside Formula One garages, momentum like that changes everything emotionally. Mechanics feel it. Engineers feel it. The entire energy around the winning side of the garage becomes stronger automatically. Meanwhile, the other side starts feeling pressure increase naturally. Nobody needs to say anything openly. Drivers notice it immediately. That is why Mercedes suddenly looks vulnerable despite having the fastest car. Because championships are not destroyed only by slow pace. Sometimes they collapse because pressure quietly destroys trust from the inside. And once trust weakens inside a Formula One team, every problem becomes harder to solve. A reliability issue becomes personal. An FIA review becomes political. A teammate rivalry becomes emotional warfare. That is exactly the direction Mercedes appears to be moving after Canada. And the terrifying part for the rest of Formula One? Mercedes may still keep winning while all of this gets worse. Because if the W17 remains this fast, the pressure inside the team will not decrease. It will increase every single weekend. More scrutiny. More emotional tension. More questions about the electrical systems. More pressure between Russell and Antonelli. Eventually, something gives. And if that breaking point arrives during a direct championship fight between both Mercedes drivers, Canada may later be remembered as the exact moment the entire season started falling apart.